All right, yeah, so I'm going to give kind of the purpose and logistics for what we're doing here today. And Amy will chime in as needed as well. All right, so this issue's already kind of been hinted at by Sarah, but one of the kind of key definitions we need here at the beginning is like, what is the Artemis Base Camp? There's a spectrum of architectures that exist for the sustained lunar exploration phase of Artemis, as was just mentioned. And my beautiful cartoons here on the right kind of illustrate some aspects of that spectrum. So on the top, we have the distributed sorties. So in this case, you have many exploration sites, but you're basically going to a new place each time. And so you don't necessarily have the infrastructure that is built up over time. In the middle cartoon is multiple base camps or multiple exploration sites where you are going back to the same places, but there's multiple places and you're studying diverse terrains and different science questions, or perhaps they're being located such that one of them is illuminated anytime. So you always have a facility on the surface that's accessible to astronauts at any given time. And then the third would be a base camp, something that's really significant infrastructure. Perhaps it's using fission power or something like that. And then the trade there is that you're going to fewer places. So you have this really large infrastructure that could be accessible all the time, but then what you're doing outside of that local region is probably somewhat reduced. And there's a ton of different trades that could be considered. If you're thinking just static infrastructure versus mobile infrastructures, that can be enabling across the spectrum as well. If you're considering what it would be agency provided versus commercially provided, that also kind of can change what's going on here. But we wanted to set this out at the very beginning for the definition of what we're talking about here is really return to the same location or locations near the lunar South Pole. So you're not going to someplace for the first time, you're going back. There will be something there that hopefully you can use. And if you're going back to the same place over and over and over, hopefully that infrastructure and capabilities are increasing over time. So when we're thinking about the science activities and through the discussions, we really do want to focus on what is enabled by going back to the same places. And whether there's multiple places or a single place is a little bit agnostic for this. Yeah, so focusing on those two scenarios. All right, so we had two purposes of the LSSW. The first is to collect community inputs. As Sarah mentioned, LSSWs collect community inputs that can be used as part of NASA's decision-making process. LEAG identified the need for community inputs related to science activities that could be conducted at an Artemis base camp. And so we approached the LSSW organizing committee and they approved this meeting with the following scope, which is to identify specific scientific activities that may uniquely benefit from repeated returns to a location near the lunar South Pole that will inform the capabilities of Artemis Base Camp. And so the three kind of themes that we're looking at is lunar science that's uniquely enabled by the Artemis Base Camp. The second is scientific activities that could enable technology development. And the third is scientific activities that feed forward to crewed Mars exploration. And you'll probably note, as many in the community did, that this specifically excludes topics related to astrophysics and the biological and physical divisions. We felt that increasing the scope to multiple divisions was really going to kind of stretch what we're able to accomplish here, and we needed to have a little bit narrower focus, at least for this meeting. And in particular with the biological and physical sciences, they're having their own LSSW, and so they would like to capture aspects of this topic in that meeting in the future. The output of this meeting is a report that is representative of the discussions that we have today, and it'll be produced by the co-conveners, Amy, myself, as well as the facilitators and the documentarians that are supporting this meeting as well. And this was already noted also by Sarah, but there is an intent to have a NASA study related to science during the sustained lunar exploration phase in the coming years. And our assumption is that this final report could help drive some of the discussions that are at the initial phases of that study. And the second purpose, the reason why LEAG identified a community need for these inputs is we were directed by NASA to actually study this topic somewhat. So last year at LSSW 19, Nikki Fox was asked a really good question, and that was, how can science help with making that base camp a reality? And are there other critical inputs that might be needed now to make that base camp a reality? And Nikki had a really good response. She challenged the community to tell us what kind of science you need to do at the base camp. What is it that we can only do if we have a base camp and we can't do with robotic experiments or with humans out on the surface? What is it that you actually need in that base camp, and what science is driving the science in the base camp? And then finally, she tasked LEAG with this. She said she encouraged everyone to write white papers and go through LEAG for this one. So LEAG intends to be responsive to this request, and we will use the LSSW 22 report to identify priority science activities or areas of research and solicit white papers from community members and also LSSW 22 participants. We're intending that there will probably be 4 or 5 of these white papers that we would be endorsing. And an additional white paper related to that astrophysics topic is being authored by Nivedita Mahesh, who is the LEAG astrophysics liaison, to make sure that those inputs are captured as well. So in terms of the agenda, we're just wrapping up the welcome and introduction now. We'll start with a series of plenary perspectives by leaders in this area, including perspectives from ESDMD, academia, and outside of NASA as well. After that, we'll have a short break and a session of lightning talks, and Amy will be guiding rapid fire discussion of areas that the community wanted to bring forward and discuss before we do the breakout sessions. And then we'll have a breakout session overview. I'll introduce how the breakout sessions will work, and we'll have the facilitators from each of the breakout sessions kind of introduce their topic and try to recruit you to join their breakout session, since you will get to choose one at that point, and then we'll wrap up the meeting with summaries of the breakout sessions. So that's the material I had. Amy, was there anything you'd like to add?
I just kind of wanted to touch a little bit on some things that you talked about, Ben, in terms of, other things that are going to be included in a trade study. So for a potential Artemis base camp on the surface of the moon, I mean, obviously there are other things besides science that go into that. So this LSSW is about science specifically, and that's part of what goes into a trade study, but also things like lighting conditions, crew safety. Obviously, those are really important things that will go into that as well. So we are just focusing on the science here. ISRU is also, a technological development that would be important for that Artemis base camp as well. And yes, the astronomy and BPS folks, we didn't forget about y'all. We are still encouraging you to, to help us out with white papers here. But with one day, we kind of had to keep the focus a little bit narrow. One other thing I wanted to, actually 2 more things. All of our talks are important, but I'm going to highlight 2 of them. One of them, the first one that we're going to have here in just a few minutes, is about the Moon to Mars architecture. So if you have not yet had a chance to hear about that, please pay particular attention and really start thinking about where you think an Artemis base camp would fit in there and how it can achieve different objectives. And then the other is our talk at the end of the plenaries about McMurdo. And so we asked for this talk specifically because it's a great analog for how an Artemis base camp on the surface of the moon could be really successful and help to drive science. So really start to think about what other types of science we could maybe focus on at Artemis base camp, get those juices flowing in your brain through all of those talks. I think that's about it, Ben. I know we have just a couple minutes left before 11:15, so I will give another plug for coming to the breakouts. We've got almost 100 people on right now. I know a lot of y'all are on for the plenaries, but please stay for the breakouts. That's where the meat of this meeting is. So if you're available, please stick around. And that's about all I got.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amy. And I would add one other thing. We do have a couple of verbal Q&A sessions, one after following Suttle's talk, and then a second one following James, John, and Sarah's talks. But at any point, feel free to put comments or questions into chat, and we'll encourage the speakers to address any of those questions.
Yeah, and we also are
as soon
going
as
to be
they're-
recording the chat. So we'll have that captured for everybody. And we have documentarians who are helping us out today in the breakouts and during the plenaries, and they will help write that report as well. So we're trying really hard to make sure that we capture everybody's things. I know this is really a crunch of trying to scrunch a lot of things all together, but we've got a lot of different ways of capturing your comments. And if something comes up later that you think of, in the middle of the night, and you think, oh my gosh, this is brilliant, and we didn't talk about it, feel free to send one of us an email, and we'll see how we might be able to get that incorporated.